When you open Google Maps, you expect to see everything laid out in front of you, every house, every street, every detail, right at your fingertips. But sometimes you'll come across a home that doesn't want to be seen, a property that's been blurred, censored, almost erased. At first, it just feels like a glitch. But then you realize these places are hidden for a reason, not because of privacy, but because of horror. Behind some of these blurred walls are stories of murder, abduction, and secrets so disturbing that they've left a scar not just on the neighborhood, but on the internet itself. In today's video, we will be uncovering the dark reason why Google blurs houses. Before I talk to you about the disturbing cases, let me tell you the other reasons why Google Maps blurs houses. This is either because someone requested their home to be hidden for prying eyes, perhaps to protect their family, their privacy, or even their valuables. Sometimes it's a celebrity or high-profile figure shielding themselves from the constant attention of the outside world. Other times it's a government or military building blurred for national security reasons, or a sensitive facility that simply cannot appear on public maps. Occasionally, entire streets or neighborhoods are blurred at the request of residents' associations or mistakes in Google's automated blurring system hid an innocent home, leaving it forever veiled in mystery. On Reddit, there's countless of stories of people blurring their houses, but once they move away from their childhood home and want to revisit it on Google Maps, they'll be presented with the blur that they requested years ago. Apparently, once you blur your home, it's extremely difficult to unblur it. Almost impossible. But for this video, we will not be looking at blurred houses for those reasons. Instead, we'll be diving deep into blurred houses where horrific crimes were committed. Sometimes, if a house has a dark history like murder, Google will blur the house so people who are curious don't turn it into a tourist spot. Although this is a valid reason, I don't think that works and does quite the opposite. Because if you're curious about true crime and want to do research on a house and it turns out that Google blurred it, now there's a bigger reason why someone would want to go to it in person to see the house for themselves. The first house we're talking about is an infamous one and you most likely heard about it. And that's no other than the Ariel Castro House. Between 2002 and 2004 in Cleveland, Ohio, Ariel Castro, a former school bus driver, abducted 3 young women, Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina DeJesus, and held them captive for over a decade inside his house at 2207 Seymour Avenue in the Tremont neighborhood. The ordeal came to an end on May 6, 2013, when Amanda Berry managed to break free with her 6-year-old daughter, born in captivity, and called for help. Police stormed the house and rescued Knight and DeJesus, taking Castro into custody later that same day. Ariel Castro was born in Puerto Rico in 1960 and raised partly in Pennsylvania and later Cleveland, where his father lived. He grew up in a deeply toxic environment. Reports show that he was essayed as a child, both by a neighbor and by an uncle, while his mother physically and verbally assaulted him. Castro struggled throughout his youth, eventually attending Lincoln West High School in Cleveland, which he even got suspended one time for touching a girl's chest. As an adult, he entered a relationship with Grimilda Figueroa, with whom he had 4 children. Their relationship was extremely toxic and abusive. Figueroa's relationship recounted repeated beatings and left her with broken bones and eventually a brain tumor. She left him in the mid-1990s, though Castro continued to harass and threaten her until her death in 2012. For years, Castro held a job as a Cleveland school bus driver, but his reckless behavior, including leaving children unattended, led to his firing in 2012 around that time. His home had also fallen into foreclosure after years of unpaid taxes. Castro's method of kidnapping was disturbingly consistent. He would offer his victims a ride, lure them into his house, and then restrain them in his basement before moving them to locked rooms upstairs. Michelle Knight vanished in August 2002 at the age of 21, on her way back to a custody hearing for her son. Authorities initially suspected she had run away, and she was even removed from federal missing person databases, which meant her case drew little attention until her rescue. Amanda Berry disappeared in April 2003, the day before her 17th birthday. After finishing a shift at a Burger King, a chilling phone call from her abductor to her family briefly raised hopes, but her mother passed away in 2006, still believing she might find her daughter. During her captivity, Berry gave birth to a daughter on Christmas Day in 2006. Gina DeJesus, only 14, was abducted in April 2004 while walking home from school. She trusted Castro because he was the father of a close friend. Despite media attention and vigils, she remained missing until the day of the escape. Inside Castro's house, the three women endured unimaginable abuse. They were locked in dark rooms, fed crappy meals, and allowed to shower only a couple times a week. Diaries later recovered revealed the horrific acts of daily essay, threats, and beatings. Michelle Knight suffered the worst physical abuse. She became pregnant multiple times, but Castro forced miscarriages through brutal beatings. She lost hearing in one ear and required reconstructive surgery. A dog she kept briefly was killed by Castro in front of her. Berry's daughter was delivered by Knight's help, under threats that both would be killed if the baby didn't survive. Remarkably, Knight managed to save the child when she briefly stopped breathing. Castro paraded the little girl around as his granddaughter, even taking her outside the house while keeping the three women locked away. On May 6, 2013, Castro left his house without properly securing the inner door. Berry saw her chance. She shouted to neighbors for help, eventually breaking through the storm door with the assistance of Charles Ramsey, a local man who became a central figure in the story. Berry and her daughter crawled to freedom, and police quickly entered the home, rescuing Knight and DeJesus. Castro was arrested that same day, initially charged with kidnapping and R-word. The case quickly expanded to 977 criminal counts, including aggravated murder for causing Knight's miscarriages. Facing the death penalty, Castro struck a plea deal in July 2013. He pled guilty to 937 counts in exchange for life in prison plus 1,000 years without parole. His house was demolished soon after. On August 7, 2013, with Knight present, releasing yellow balloons to honor missing children. At sentencing, Castro rambled about pornography, claimed much of the sex was consensual, and even suggested he was not a monster. The judge cut him short, reminding him he would die in prison. Michelle Knight, in a powerful statement, told him, "You took 11 years of my life away. Now your hell is just beginning." Barely a month into his life sentence, on September 3, 2013, Castro was found dead in his cell, hanging from bed sheets. Though some officials floated the possibility of autoerotic asphyxiation, the coroner ruled it that he took himself out. He was 53 years old. The three survivors began rebuilding their lives in different ways. A community fund raised over $1 million to help them. Knight later changed her name, married, and wrote about her ordeal, though she was unable to reunite with her son, who had been adopted. Berry became a reporter covering missing persons cases, and DeJesus worked to support families through the Amber Alert system. Today the house is gone, just an empty lot where unthinkable horrors once unfolded. But if you pull up the old Google Street View, the only image is from 2009. The house is blurred now. Yet what makes it so haunting is knowing that when that picture was taken, the girls were still inside. In the quiet community of Frederick, Colorado, a horrifying crime unfolded in the early hours of August 13, 2018. Christopher Lee Waltz strangled his pregnant wife, Shanann Watts, and then suffocated their two daughters, Bella and Celeste, who were only 4 and 3 years old. He buried Shanann in a shallow grave near an oil storage site belonging to his employer, Anadarko Petroleum, and forced the bodies of his little girls into separate crude oil tanks. At first, Watts appeared to the public as a distraught husband and father, giving interviews outside his home and pleading for the safe return of his family. But within days, the truth unraveled. On August 15th, he was arrested after failing a polygraph test and confessing, though he initially tried to shift blame onto Shanann. Months later, he admitted fully that he had murdered all three. On November 6, 2018, Watts entered a guilty plea to multiple counts of first-degree murder in exchange for prosecutors taking the death penalty off the table. Less than 2 weeks later, he was sentenced to 5 life sentences without parole, 3 to be served consecutively. Christopher Lee Watts was born on May 16, 1985 in Spring Lake, North Carolina. His wife Shanna was born on January 10, 1984 in Aberdeen, North Carolina. They met in 2010, married on November 3, 2012, and eventually had 2 daughters, Bella and Celeste. At the time of her murder, Shanna was 15 weeks pregnant with their son they had planned to name Nico. The family moved to Frederick in 2013, purchasing a 5-bedroom house at 2825 Saratoga Trail. 2 years later, in 2015, they filed for bankruptcy. Watts worked at Anadarko Petroleum, while Shanna worked from home as a sales representative for Lavelle, promoting a product called Thrive. Shanna returned from a business trip to Arizona just before 2 a.m. on August 13, 2018, dropped off at home by her friend and coworker Nicole. That same day, Nicole grew alarmed when Shanna missed a scheduled medical appointment and failed to return calls or texts. By early afternoon, she arrived at the Watts home herself. When no one answered, she called both Chris and the police. At about 1:40 p.m., Frederick police arrived at the Watts home to carry out a welfare check. Inside, they found Shanna's purse, phone, and keys. Her car, still containing the girls' car seats, was parked in the garage, and her wedding ring lay on the bedside table. Despite these signs, Watts told the police he had no idea where his family might be. The FBI and Colorado Bureau of Investigation quickly joined the search. Watts even stood outside his house for TV interviews, insisting he wanted Shanna and the girls home safely, while search teams with dogs combed through the property just behind him. On August 15th, Watts agreed to take a polygraph test and failed. Confronted, he broke down at first, confessed to his father Ronnie, claiming falsely that Shanna had killed the girls and he had strangled her in a rage. He then repeated this story to detectives. That same day, Watts was arrested. By the evening of August 16, investigators discovered Shanna buried in a shallow grave at an Anadarko site. The bodies of Bella and Celeste were recovered from 2 separate crude oil tanks, each forced through an 8-inch hatch. The medical examiner noted that Bella's body bore scratches and strands of hair were found near the tank opening. On August 21st, prosecutors charged Watts with 3 counts of first-degree murder plus additional counts, including the unlawful termination of Shanna's pregnancy and tampering with bodies. By then, he had been filed by Anadarko. Surveillance footage from a neighbor's security camera recorded in the early morning of August 13th showed Watts bringing his truck into the garage and loading it, what investigators concluded were the bodies of his family. This contradicted his story that Shanna had left the house alive. Interestingly enough, we have body cam footage of an officer and Chris in a neighbor's house where the neighbor shows the footage of Chris moving the bodies. For whatever reason, a commercial plays during the surveillance footage, and what happens next is very eerie. Remember that Shanann was pregnant and that Chris buried the girls' bodies in an oil tank. So how do we explain this ad popping up, showing a fetus and a skull peeping out of what seems to be oil? I have no idea, and since when were there ads in surveillance footage? On November 6, 2018, Watts pled guilty to all charges. In early December 2018, he was transferred out of Colorado due to safety concerns. By December 5th, he was housed at Dodge Correctional Institution in Wisconsin, a maximum security prison where he remains today. The house still stands, and if you go to Google Street View, you could find that the house where this horrific crime took place is now blurred. A lot of the neighbors have also blurred their homes. just so people like me doing investigations on the Watts case won't leak their address. Which is extremely valid, and the neighbors have nothing to do with this case. Minus the one neighbor that showed surveillance footage to police, which led to the arrest of Chris Watts. In the early morning hours of October 15, 2018, tragedy struck the small town of Barron, Wisconsin. At 12:53 a.m., Jake Thomas Patterson forced his way into the Closs family home. Within minutes, he had fatally shot Jayme Closs at the front door and then murdered Denise Closs, who had dialed 911 seconds earlier while hiding in the bathroom with her daughter. Patterson bound 13-year-old Jayme Closs with duct tape, dragging her through the blood-soaked house, and stuffed her into the trunk of his car. By the time police arrived just 4 minutes later, she was already gone. For the next 88 days, Patterson held Jayme captive in a remote cabin in Gordon, Wisconsin, about 70 miles from her home. She finally escaped on January 10, 2019, running barefoot through the snow to find help from a neighbor walking her dog. Patterson had noticed Jayme weeks earlier while driving to work and watching her board her school bus. In his own words, he decided then and there that she was the girl I wanted to take. He attempted to abduct her twice before, but turned away, worried about leaving witnesses. On his third attempt, he came armed with a shotgun and dressed in all black, determined not to fail. After shooting James through the front door, Patterson forced his way inside. Denise and Jayme had locked themselves in the bathroom, but Patterson broke the door down. He shot Denise, tied Jayme's wrists and ankles with duct tape, and carried her outside. Deputies responding to the 911 call passed him on the road, sirens blaring, unaware that the terrified girl was locked in the trunk just seconds away. At his cabin, Patterson kept Jayme under his bed, barricading her with heavy bins filled with weights and other belongings. He threatened that bad things would happen if she tried to escape. Sometimes she was left trapped for up to 12 hours without food, water, or access to a bathroom. Whenever Patterson's father visited on Saturdays, Jayme was forced under the bed again, a radio blasting to drown out any sound. Around Christmas, Patterson left her hidden there for hours while he visited relatives. Jayme recalled that once, when she accidentally moved one of the bins, Patterson beat her with a curtain rod. Though he rarely allowed her outside, Patterson convinced himself she was too frightened to run. He didn't bother with special locks. The two even ate meals and watched television together, though Jayme later described her time there as a nightmare of threats and control. On the afternoon of January 10, 2019, Patterson told Jayme he would be gone for a couple of hours. As soon as he left, she pushed her way out from under the barricade and ran. Wearing only leggings, a light shirt, and Patterson's oversized sneakers, she made her way down the snowy road until she found Jean Nutter, a neighbor walking her dog. Nutter, recognizing Jayme from the widely circulated missing posters, immediately took her to another house and called the police. By 4:45 p.m., officers had Jayme safely in their care. Her description of Patterson and his vehicle led deputies to spot him minutes later. When stopped, Patterson got out of his car and calmly said, "I did it." He was arrested on the spot. On January 14, 2019, Patterson was charged with 2 counts of first-degree intentional homicide, 1 count of kidnapping, and armed burglary. His bail was set at $5 million. A month later, in letters and phone calls to reporters, Patterson admitted he intended to plead guilty, insisting he didn't want Jayme or her family to suffer through the trial. On March 27, 2019, he formally pled guilty to the murders of James and Denise Closs and the kidnapping of Jayme. The armed burglary charge was dismissed. At his plea hearing, as he was led from the courtroom, Patterson shouted, "By Jayme" to the cameras. During sentencing on May 24, 2019, Jayme's family read impact statements, including one written by Jayme herself. She told the court Patterson had taken her parents, her home, and her sense of safety, but he could never take her spirit. The judge handed down the maximum punishment, 2 consecutive life sentences without parole plus 40 years. That summer, Patterson was moved from Wisconsin to the penitentiary of New Mexico for security reasons. He was later registered as a sex offender and has since remained incarcerated. After her rescue, Jayme went to live with her aunt and uncle. Hormel, the parent company of Geneo Plant, where her parents worked, awarded her $25,000 in reward money, recognizing her extraordinary bravery in rescuing herself. Her family home in Barron, where the murders and abduction took place, was released by authorities back to the estate and later demolished in August 2019. Now, Jayme has spoken out on behalf of other missing and exploited children. Her survival story has become a rallying point for awareness of child abduction and the importance of supporting victims as they rebuild their lives. If you search up Jake Thomas Patterson's address on Street View, you cannot see anything. However, if you go to Jayme Closs' parents' home where she was abducted, it is indeed blurred. Actually, Google did an awful job at blurring it, because when you search up the address to view the home, it's not even blurred. It's only blurred if you go to October 2018 street capture, and it's only blurred at an angle. So you can easily still see the home by simply typing the address.
This next house is blurred on Google, but at the same time, it's not. Let me explain. If you go view the Amityville Horror House in New York, the house is blurred, but for whatever reason, there's an image of the actual house over the blur. I don't know why it does that, but we're still counting it for this video. On November 13th, 1974, the house at 112 Ocean Avenue became the scene of a grisly crime. 23-year-old Ronald Butch DeFeo Jr. turned a .35 caliber Marlin rifle on his own family inside their home at 112 Ocean Avenue. He murdered his father, mother, and 4 siblings as they slept. 6 victims total, each face down in bed. No signs of struggle, no forced entry, and despite multiple gunshots, no neighbors reported hearing a thing. DeFeo's account shifted almost immediately. He first claimed that the killings were carried out by a mob hitman, but that story quickly collapsed. Under questioning, he admitted responsibility, later insisting that voices had urged him to do it. His trial began the following year. The defense argued insanity, pointing to his claims of hearing voices. The prosecution emphasized intent and method. 6 calculated murders carried out one by one. After 7 weeks, the jury found him guilty of 6 counts of second-degree murder. The sentence, 6 terms of 25 years to life in prison. DeFeo remained incarcerated until his death in March of 2021, never offering a single explanation that stayed consistent. Just over a year later, in December of 1975, George and Kathy Lutz bought the DeFeo home for $80,000. They moved in with Kathy's 3 children and their dog. The broker had warned them about the murders, but they decided to move forward anyway. After only 28 days, the Lutz family left the house abruptly, abandoning nearly all of their belongings. They later claimed the home was unlivable. Their departure and the house's violent past drew national attention. Soon after, their story inspired Jay Anson's book, The Amityville Horror, and the film series that followed. But beyond popular culture, the fact remains: a family murdered in 1974, another family gone within a month, and a house that became one of the most recognizable addresses in America. Subsequent owners have reported no unusual activity. Most speak only of unwanted attention, tourists outside with cameras, and the constant reminder of what happened there. The famous windows have been remodeled, the address has been changed, yet the history cannot be erased. The current owners decided to blur the house, but once again, Google didn't do a very good job.
Technically, this doesn't count for the video because the house is not blurred, but you can no longer access the road where this house is located, and it's no other than John Wayne Gacy. Between 1972 and 1978, John Wayne Gacy preyed on teenage boys and young men around Chicago, luring many to his Norwood Park Ranch house with the promise of work or casual company. Inside, he restrained and murdered them, usually by ligature asphyxiation. He hid the evidence at home. 26 bodies were buried in the crawl space, 3 more elsewhere on the property, and 4 were dumped in the Des Plaines River when the crawl space filled up. The case cracked after 15-year-old Robert Priest vanished in December 1978, pointing police to Gacy and at the house on West Somerdale Avenue. He was convicted of 33 murders, sentenced to death in 1980, and executed in 1994. Not only is Gacy a notorious serial killer, but the reason why so many people are interested in this case is that Gacy carefully crafted a second identity that made his crimes even more disturbing. He performed at children's parties, hospitals, and charity events dressed as Pogo the Clown, a character he designed himself. Neighbors and community members saw him as a civic-minded contractor, completely unaware of the horrors taking place beneath his home. It was this bizarre double life and later earned his nickname, the Killer Clown, cementing his case as one of the most infamous in American criminal history. Due to these tragic events, the house was demolished in April 1979. Just a few months after, investigators uncovered the bodies in the crawl space. The property sat vacant for 8 years. A new home wasn't built on the property until 1986, when a private residence was constructed on the site. Unlike Gacy's original ranch-style house, the new build was different in appearance and design, as well as changing the address. As mentioned, the house is not blurred and you can barely see it, since you can no longer go further down the road in front of the house. Funny enough, one of his neighbors actually blurred their own house, most likely to prevent people like me showing their house because they're aware that people will want to investigate Gacy's home and they simply don't want to show their house, which is extremely valid. Thank you guys so much for watching till the end of this video, and if you enjoyed this one, you will enjoy this other video where I do a deep dive on one of the most disturbing Yelp reviewers.